welcome to No Broken Legs. It is a Browns bye-week edition of our NFL picks. I am your host, Evan Belfiore, and joining me to talk about where the Browns are at the bye week and what things look like for them moving forward is Jimmy Champ. Jimmy, how are you on this Saturday afternoon?
Man, the shoot jobs have me in a figure four all week, using the rope for leverage and raking leaves all morning. So I'm glad to get to escape a little bit here to talk about some football, how our Browns look, what we think will happen after the bye, and get some picks for this week, man.
Yeah, the Browns are 3-5. They got a big win over Cincinnati on Monday night, and I guess the first place I want to start is there were a lot of things to like about that Cincinnati game for Browns fans, but the one thing that had me the most worried was how much they were jawing and patting themselves on the back. Like, they beat Cincinnati all the time. I don't know what that really means moving forward, considering what the team has looked like. There's been good, there's been bad. What do you expect from that Cincinnati game to be what the Browns look like moving forward? What parts of that do you think are real, and what parts of that do you think were they just do this to Cincinnati all the time?
I mean, I'm going to continue my skeptic view on this Browns team, and I'm going to say I think most of it was fake, or most of it is just for whatever reason. When it comes to Joe Burrow and the Bengals, they just look like a different team. We were talking about it during the game, like, oh, hey, this is going to be the week where Miles actually shows up all game instead of a couple splash plays. He was excellent. Like, the offense, but we got to remember, like, the offense did not look great in the first quarter. Like, they got rolling, but they didn't look great to start. But I agree with you. A team that has underperformed like they have and lost games the way they have, when they make big plays and they get a big lead and things are going right, I would prefer them to act like that's where they should be instead of the tribal war screams that they were letting off. I don't think it should have been necessary.
I went back and looked at that game last year when Baker looked like he was back to his 2020 self. They were throwing the ball all over the place. Joe Burrow was running for his life. And we all thought last year that was a turning point, and then that ended up not being the case. And that's just sort of what I'm thinking about right now. It's something that we see happen a lot with fans. They see the team's peak performance and they think, oh, why don't they do that every week? And it's like, because that's their peak performance. Everything else is going to be less than that because you're not always at your best. Or happens often in football, your best in week 1 is very different than your best in week 8. And that's just the rigors of the season. Any marathon runner will tell you that. Like, anybody can do 3 miles. Can you do 23?
Right.
And that's what the NFL season is. So these teams, like, they just get tired. They wear down. Guys get hurt. Man, it's a long season, and one game for the Browns isn't going to turn it all around, especially when they've got Miami, Buffalo, and Tampa Bay coming up. And they have to win 2 of those games to stay alive.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like if you try to run the same game plan, you just ran against Cincinnati, against Miami and Buffalo, it's not going to work. They're just going to throw screen passes, they're going to play draws, they're going to beat you if you try to attack them. I would still attack. It was a novel idea to see 5 Browns rushing the quarterback at the same time. Like, it was a wonderful thing. I would still try it, but it's not going to be as effective. But that exact game plan should be able to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as they are playing right now. Now, 3 weeks from now, both teams could look vastly different again, as you just talked. What do they look like playing their best game of the season, where they finished the game, put the boot on the throat, got the job done, get the bye week to rest up? Now, can they keep that energy against Miami? Because if you lose that energy for 6 minutes in a game against the Dolphins offense, they'll score 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, Jalen, we'll talk about their game with Chicago coming up, but things are really working for Miami down there. That offense is putting up a lot of points. That defense is playing really well. I don't think anybody expects Buffalo to lose the rest of the season. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a slip up here or there because there's a lot of the season left.
I think there may be a slip up coming up here in a few hours, my friend.
Oh, I like that tease. I just like Tampa, like you said, Tampa looks like that could be the formula tonight could work against Tampa where they just can't block your defensive front. But all those other guys on the line besides Garrett haven't done anything for most of the season. And they seem to always get pressure on Cincinnati. So I don't know how much of that they can duplicate. And the other thing is, we talk about it, even though he made it to the Super Bowl last year, Cincinnati doesn't have a good head coach.
No.
Where was Joe Mixon?
No.
Like they just abandoned the run for no reason. And when you see this Cleveland Browns team, the last thing I want opposing teams to do if I'm the Browns is just start pounding it. Because that has been their Achilles heel all season. It's just like with what happened with Carolina. Where they just abandon the run and they throw into the teeth of this defense and let that pass rush just come at you.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, and then we saw the inverse with New England, where New England said, "Hey, we can just run the ball right up the middle all day long, and they can't stop us." And then that opened up the pass. No, I agree.
Yeah, and that's something Tampa Bay is going to be able to do. They're going to be able to run the ball.
You know, there were a lot of preseason shows, football podcast analysts out there. They wanted you to believe at the start of the years that the Bengals were in the class with the Bills and the Chiefs, and you know we were definitely. I think we were right in saying we had concerns. We didn't think they were not there. You know, I did applaud them for trying to get better on the offensive line. It doesn't seem to have worked. And Joe Burrow without Jamar Chase to just chuck balls to, the offense doesn't work. Zach Taylor is not that good of a head coach. But I agree with you. Where was Mixon? But once again, like, kudos to Kevin Stefanski and the coaching staff for having a game plan and the team looking that good. But I think they have the talent.
Hey, they put Chubb and Hunt in the backfield and on the field together at the same time, and they got positive results, Jimmy. Who knew?
I can't believe it.
Who knew? Putting your best players on the field at the same time helps opens things up.
I can't believe it. It was like when you had Tecmo Bowl. I mean, you know, a lot of times I feel like Kevin Stefanski is using the Raiders, but not running the ball with Bo and Marcus. So I don't know, man. Like it drives me crazy. But kudos to them. Kudos to the Browns. We talked about it. One of these teams needed that game. It could absolutely change the trajectory of the season. I will probably be on Miami's side. I don't know that game's going to be close, but I'm just so curious to see what they look like, fresh, rejuvenated. You've had a chance to put a game plan together. I mean, Miami's, it's not real complicated. It's just whether or not you can stop it, and it's really hard to stop for 4 quarters. But if that Myles Garrett shows up, that'll be a big help. So, you know, kudos to the Browns. It was a great, great game. You were on it. You said it was going to happen, and it did. So kudos to you. And like I said, hopefully they can sustain some of it coming out after the bye next week.
I don't know what it is Kevin Stefanski has on Zach Taylor, but it is the same thing that Bill Belichick has on Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
Like it just, you just watch those games and you go, this game should be a lot closer than it is, and that's usually an example of coaching. I don't think Zach Taylor's very good. I know you don't think Zach Taylor's very good. We do criticize Kevin Stefanski a lot more than a lot of other places do, especially in the Cleveland area. But we both think Kevin Stefanski's at least a good head coach. He might not be a great Hall of Fame head coach, but he's a good head coach. He's certainly not a terrible head coach.
Right, and I think our problem with Stefanski, and I think what it comes down to is there are not a lot of head coaches in the NFL that when they get their first head coaching gig, they have the roster and the talent that Kevin Stefanski has, and he seems to just not want to use it. He wants to get way more complicated than it needs to be a lot of times, I think. It's probably what our biggest gripe is with Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, and he just doesn't seem to always play to his team's strengths. And that gets back to what we were just talking about with Chubb and Hunt being on the field at the same time.
Yep.
Well, we'll see what the Browns look like when they come back. The 3 games against Miami, Buffalo, and Tampa, that's going to show us who they are. Because if they can get out of that winning 2 and going into getting Watson back at 5 and 6, I mean, you're at least in the discussion. I don't know if I think they're I don't think they're going to make it because I don't know what the fuck Watson's going to look like when he comes back.
Exactly.
And he's not going to have DeAndre Hopkins, and there isn't any. Cooper's fine. Amari Cooper's a good wide receiver, but he's not DeAndre Hopkins.
Right. Well, and I think if you want to, talk about that like just for a second, like I think you'll be okay. I imagine they play him in Houston. And I don't know. That's going to be a weird game for him emotionally.
Well, they said he's going to start that game, and Houston's not very good.
No, but and that's fine. So you go get a win there, but what's the weather going to look like in Cincinnati on 12-11? What's the weather going to look like in Baltimore on 12-18?
Oh, that's a really good point, Jimmy. I forgot about that. He's somebody who's never really played in cold weather.
And he's said, I don't perform well in cold weather. I don't necessarily like playing in it. And then you've got Washington in January and Pittsburgh the last game of the season.
Yeah, and then all the home games on the lakefront's going to be cold. I know it's unseasonably warm now, but it is going to get cold.
Yeah, so I'm very curious what that's going to look like when you come out of the game in Houston. But, we'll see. He didn't look particularly well in that preseason game, which was to be expected. So hopefully he's been able to put his head down, get to work, and he'll be ready to lead the team, hopefully.
There's probably a sense in Berea with how successful they've been with Brissett that even if Watson comes in and just plays 10% better than Brissett has, I think he's better than 10% better than him, but just, looking at a minimum level that you're expecting from Watson when he comes in, if they end up scoring 3 to 5 more points a game, maybe that makes up for some of those defensive deficiencies that they have.
Yeah.
We do have one game in the books as we move to the rest of the NFL. Jimmy, I'm 26-17 against the spread and with over-unders the last 3 weeks after a pretty rough start to the year. And I went back and looked the last 2 years. This has happened every year. I do poorly at the beginning of the season, and as we get into the middle part of the season, that's where I seem to make hay.
You've got a lot of fantasy analysts out there who, remind everybody at the start of the year predicting the future is hard.
Yeah, it sure as fuck is.
But I think we do here at No Broken Legs. I think we do a great job of analyzing the data the teams are giving us and trying to lead you in the right direction. So, but you've been like killing the over-unders lately.
Yeah, I had an 11-3 week, like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Which
was pretty awesome. On that note, to show that things can change quickly, I got both things wrong with the Philadelphia-Houston game. Now, I took Philly in our picks. I like Philly in a 7-point and money line teaser that we'll have other teams in it with Buffalo, KC, and then doing pairs with those three. So this was fine for me that they only won by 12. Philly 8-0, man. They look like the class of the NFC. They just pick up Robert Quinn.
I told you.
You were on it. Do you right now think they're the favorites? Should they be the favorites? I think everybody's off of the Rams. A lot of people like the 49ers. Nobody really seems to have any faith in the Vikings. Is Philadelphia in the driver's seat here? They're definitely in the driver's seat for the 1 seed.
Yeah, no, I think they have to be the favorites right now. Now, I do still think you could, with Tampa and the Rams, if they find a
Green
player.
Bay.
Yeah, even Green Bay. Like if you find a player on the depth chart who makes a little bit of an impact at a position you're struggling at, your scheme gets a little different. Those 2 teams, even those 3 teams, you want to include Green Bay, they could go on a late season run. Like it wouldn't surprise me. As of right now, though, I think Philadelphia is the most complete team in the NFC. Jalen Hurts is doing well. I don't understand anybody. Like, even with Christian McCaffrey, Jimmy Garoppolo is still the quarterback. So that limitation is there for San Francisco. The only team they could beat in the playoffs is Minnesota because Kirk Cousins is even worse in primetime than Jimmy Garoppolo. And I love the Vikings. I love what they're doing. I think their head coach deserves more credit towards coaches here. I don't think it's runaway for Brian Dable right now personally. I think Minnesota's new coach is in there too. But we know what Kirk Cousins is probably going to look like in a primetime important game, which stinks for that organization. But I think Philly right now, Jalen Hurts looks great. Miles Sanders looks great. A.J. Brown looks like he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory right now. The defense is playing hard. They're getting after it. They can quick strike offense. They can They can have drives where they eat 8 minutes off the clock. The team looks great. They look like they know what they're doing. And right now, they would be silly to not have Super Bowl aspirations.
Yeah, I like that they went out and got Robert Quinn. That's going to make that defense even even more formidable. Jalen Hurts, man, I've been skeptical, but they're using him like you should use him. They're playing to his strengths. They're letting him run the ball. They're not quite going the Lamar Jackson route where he's running a lot, although Jackson hasn't been running as much this year. We're seeing that across the league. The guys that you can run designed runs for, or that can really hurt you if you just give up large parts of the field in pass coverage, like that seems to be where things are going. And it's because defenses are just getting so fast. And that's probably why we're seeing some of the teams that can just line up and run the ball be successful, or at least have some success on offense and keep some games close.
Yeah, and the thing that killed Houston early in the game, they were having success putting double coverage on A.J. Brown, and then after a series, Jalen Hurts went, "Oh yeah, I've got a Heisman-winning wide receiver on the other side. I'll just throw it to Devonta Smith." Like, they have a stacked offense for a
their
limited run here.
Their tight end is really good too.
Yeah,
Gobert or whatever his name is. He's on my fantasy
Goddard.
team.
Yeah, Dallas Goddard.
He's been great. Miles Sanders seems to his performance seems to go up and down, but that seems to vary with his touches, and it seems like there's a lot of instances where he doesn't do a lot, but they don't need him to.
Exactly.
And that's what I think is the scariest part about this team is they don't need to fire on all cylinders to beat teams by 2 scores.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they looked great, because I think that game was a lot closer in the first half than anybody would have expected, and then they were able to quick strike a little bit and take control of it. So, kudos to what Philadelphia has done, and I agree with you, like, they didn't try to make Jalen Hurts something he wasn't. They gave him time to mature a little bit, and, unlike what we saw with Baltimore for a couple of years where it was obvious to everybody Lamar Jackson was really struggling throwing deep passes outside the numbers, and they just kept calling plays to have him throw deep balls outside the numbers. Like, they haven't done that with Jalen Hurts. They've let him mature, and every time he gets better at something, they check that box on the play sheet, and they say, now we can run these plays too, instead of putting him in situations he's uncomfortable with. So, I mean, kudos to Philadelphia. They look really, really good right now.
I'm going to throw you a curveball here, Jimmy, because you brought up Coach of the Year. I think Brian Daboll's the front runner by a lot, because speaking of what you just said about making use of your quarterback's best talents, that is what Daboll's done with Daniel Jones. He's made him into an effective running back quarterback because he still can't throw the ball. And he's really bad when they have to rely on his arm. But Saquon Barkley is every bit as good as everybody said he was going to be. And it's just been nice to see him be able to stay on the field after just really basically being hurt all the time.
Yeah, but I still think Daniel Jones's inefficiencies is going to cost the Giants a playoff spot. But
the fact that they're even in the playoff discussion is a testament to how good Brian Daboll's been. They're 6-2.
Yeah, but if 6 weeks from now they still only had 6 wins, you wouldn't be surprised.
Well, no, because I thought they were going to win 6 games all year.
Right, but then you can't give Brian Daboll Coach of the Year. Like, I guess.
Well, no, but I mean, at this point, it looks like they're going to wind up getting 10 wins.
No, they're not. They're not going to get 10 wins. They're not. They're absolutely not.
But I mean,
they're not.
They're 6-2 right now. Okay,
they're not.
Pete Carroll then.
Nick Sirianni.
Do you think if Buffalo goes 16-1, McDermott ends up winning it or not? What's his name?
Yeah, no, you're right, McDermott. That's it.
Oh yeah, Sean McDermott. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it'll depend. I think it'll depend what Philadelphia ends up at. Because I mean,
if they go undefeated, then
I think even if Philly only had 1 or 2 losses, it's much more unexpected than the Bills only having 1 or 2 losses.
Probably those 3. Yeah, it's probably closer than I think, because I also don't think what the Giants are doing is necessarily sustainable just because Daniel Jones is such a detriment. But that's a team that looks like if they can find a real quarterback, the Giants are going to be really dangerous. And I know I'm looking at their standing. They're 6-2, but they only have a 6-point positive point differential, so they're winning a lot of really close games.
Exactly.
Not necessarily sustainable, but if you get somebody in there that can play that position better, I mean, imagine Jalen Hurts in that offense.
Yep.
And those guys are out there. A team that has also done better than what we expected them to do is the Atlanta Falcons, and they've also made use of using their quarterback as a running back. And that's what makes this game interesting. We have the Falcons are home. They are 3-point underdogs to the Los Angeles Chargers. The over-under sits at 49.5. Minus 158 for Los Angeles on the money line, plus 135. Jimmy, I don't understand this line. Atlanta wants to run the ball, and the Chargers, they're 26th in rush defense, and they don't seem to ever be able to stop the run. And they also seem to just be a team that has a hex on them. So explain to me why the Chargers are 3-point road favorites here.
Because their talent is still just incredibly more so than Atlanta.
Yeah, but a lot of it's wearing the Tracy McGrady uniform.
Yeah, you're not wrong, but I'm still taking the Chargers here. I think this is about the start of the part of the season where I think Atlanta is going to because the way it's not like they're just lining up and running the ball. It's like a lot of gadgety, weird runs.
You think the league's catching up?
Yeah, I think the league's catching up. So I'm going to take the Chargers here. I do expect there's going to be some wonky shit here when you put Brandon Staley across from Arthur Smith. Like, I don't know what it's going to be, but there's going to be some funky shenanigans in this one, man.
A fun fact about the 4-3 LA Chargers with, the guy who's supposed to be assuming the rank of one of the best quarterbacks in the league, Justin Herbert, they're minus 25 on the season.
We thought Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow were being very overvalued at the start of the year. We didn't think they were quite as close to the top of the quarterbacks as a lot of other people did. And it's showing. When Justin Herbert has all of his weapons in a clean pocket, he's incredible. But that's just something that doesn't happen every week in the NFL.
Yeah, the screwiness and the potential for screwiness with these coaches and these teams is why you're not getting better than plus 135 for Atlanta.
Yeah.
Because I kind of like betting on Atlanta to win this game, but at plus 135, you're not getting very good odds. There's better games, there's better bets to make.
Yep.
Our next matchup is the Miami Dolphins. They are traveling north to take on the Chicago Bears. The Dolphins are 4.5-point favorites. This was 5 on Wednesday. The over-under is 44, or the over-under is 45.5. This has actually gone up 1.5. It was 44 on Wednesday. Yeah, so 4.5 and 45.5 are the new lines for this game. A lot of movement on it. Minus 200 money line for the Dolphins, plus 175 for the Bears. Justin Fields seems to be making shit happen for the Bears, Jimmy. Is it going to be enough to overcome all that firepower that Miami has? Can Chicago keep this close?
No, I don't think so. There were some reports that came out. You got members of the Bears defense that haven't been traded that have been saying things like, well, what the hell are we even doing here now? So I don't think that's the mindset you want for your secondary going up against Miami. I think Miami wins this. I think Miami wins this in a blowout. I like the over because Miami might score 45 points.
I'm with you. I like Miami. We've seen a lot of Cleveland Browns teams where they've traded a guy, and the teams where they traded a guy or they just didn't even try to make a move and just left average to bad players in positions and didn't even try to find upgrades anywhere, and they just give up. And I think that's a shame because Justin Fields seems to be finding his way in the league, and getting a wide receiver like Chase Claypool can help him. We'll see if Chase comes to play. On the other side, the Miami Dolphins got Bradley Chubb, and it looks like they're going to sign him. I don't know. Actually, I didn't check.
Yeah,
did they finalize an extension for him?
Oh, yeah, it's like $190 million or some shit. That's a ton of money.
Oh my God. That is a lot of guaranteed money for a guy that he's just missed a lot of games. He doesn't play all the time. Now
I don't want to.
he is a really good pass rusher, and he makes their defense that much better. Miami's going for it, and they just seem to win games with Tua, even though I still have some questions about how good Tua can be. It's we might have just reached a point in the league where the talent and skill positions are so important that we've seen San Francisco be really successful and play above the head of their quarterback.
Yeah.
I think, one, it makes more teams competitive, and two, it also makes these games really interesting because can Tua keep playing like this? Can he stay on the field is another question I have, but
Yeah.
I like their talent. They're just that wide receiver duo is just fucking people up, man.
Yeah. I don't want to be misquoted. It was 5 years, 119 million, 63.2 guaranteed
Wow. That is a lot of money
for an unproven hybrid outside linebacker who can't stay on the field.
Whew. Well, they're going for it, man. We'll see how it works out for them.
Yep,
Because
no problem with it.
Yeah, I don't either, and I still think Buffalo and Kansas City will be favored against them in the playoffs, but I think Miami can definitely give them all they want. Our next matchup is the Cincinnati Bengals. They are home. They are 7.5-point favorites against the Carolina Panthers. The over/under sits at 42.5. Moneyline plus 265 for the Panthers, minus 335 for the Bengals. Jimmy, this is a lot of points for a Cincinnati team coming off getting an ass whooping.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the Panthers here, and I think it has a lot. I think it has a lot more to do with Cincinnati than it does Carolina. But I think Carolina still defensively has the talent to somewhat duplicate the game plan the Browns gave you. Now, obviously, I don't think Carolina can beat them by 20 points because they're just not that good offensively. But I think they can win this game by a field goal or a touchdown. So I'm taking the Panthers.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm taking the Panthers with the 7.5. I'm also not confident enough in Cincinnati to put them in a 7-point tease, which at that point, all they'd have to do is win. I'm not confident in this Cincinnati team, especially without Jamar Chase, who really seems to open up their offense. And Higgins and Boyd were okay on Monday night, but they're not a 1 and a 2. They need that one up there to really make those guys great 2s and 3s. And they got to run the ball with Joe Mixon a little more. I'm not saying they got to feed him, but he can't just have like a half dozen carries for that offense to work as well as it can.
Yeah, I know. I completely agree with you. As poor as Cincinnati looked, and you're going to give me 265 on the money line and, plus 7.5 on the spread. And I think the under is probably a good play here. I might bet all three.
Yeah, I like the under as well. Our next matchup is the Green Bay Packers are traveling to Detroit to take on the Lions. They are 3.5-point favorites. This line has moved half a point. This was a 3-point line on Wednesday, 3.5 now. The over sits at 49.5. The money line is minus 190 on the Packers, plus 169 on Detroit. The Packers have really struggled offensively without Devontae Adams, but Detroit has a really, really bad offense. Jimmy, do you expect the Packers and Aaron Rodgers to get back on track this week?
Well, Detroit's at home, and their offenses look much better at home than on the road, but they do have a lot of guys questionable, a lot of guys doubtful. But yes, no, I think Aaron Rodgers will look like Hall of Fame, best to ever throw a football Aaron Rodgers this week. I think they're going to absolutely destroy Detroit. I think he's starting to gain a little bit of confidence in Romeo Doubs. I think he's getting on the right track for the team. So I really like Green Bay in this one.
Detroit's not a good team, and if Rodgers can't cover this 3 against the Lions, then stick a fork in him and the Packers. I'm taking the Packers. I can't imagine them losing this game. I think they win pretty comfortably, like you said. I like the over on the 49.5. I think Rodgers makes. Although I said this like 2 weeks ago and he didn't play very well, so we'll see. This is it, Jimmy. This is the final time. This is the final opportunity I give Rodgers to prove me wrong.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't look good against this Detroit team, you're not going to look good against anybody else.
Ain't that the damn truth? Our next matchup features the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have just been the bane of my existence this year, with the Las Vegas Raiders, who have been everything I expected them to be. The Raiders are 2.5-point favorites. I don't understand why they're favorites against anybody, especially on the road. The over-under sits at 47.5, minus 135 money line for the Raiders, plus 115 for the Jaguars. Jimmy, I just can't quit. I just can't quit the Jaguars. I like them here. I like them to win this game. Why are the Raiders 2.5-point road favorites traveling across the country?
Because everybody is afraid that Trevor Lawrence isn't any good.
Well, I think that could be a possibility.
I think that's just what it comes down to, and nobody's really sure what they're going to look like. That being said, give me Jacksonville with the points and the money line. I think I agree with you. The Jaguars, to me, I still think they're the better team here. I think Jacksonville wins this game.
The Indianapolis Colts are traveling to New England to take on the Patriots. The Pats are 5.5-point favorites here. The over-under sits at 40. Moneyline plus 205 for Indianapolis, minus 235 for the Pats. Belichick is coaching at home against a rookie QB who doesn't really look that good, coached by Frank Reich, who also isn't very good. I'm going to take the Pats here, Jimmy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we can go ahead and go to the next game. You summed it up really good there.
Just a nice side note, Frank Reich fired his offensive coordinator because the offense wasn't working, and Frank Reich calls the plays there, Jimmy. How do you think that's going to play out?
Oh, I mean, it's not a surprise. I mean, it can't be Frank Reich's fault. He's supposed to be the next great head coach in the NFL. Just because he made, he was an offensive coordinator who wasn't calling the plays for a Super Bowl winning team, and once upon a time he looked great in a playoff game and made everybody happy. So I don't understand it. I don't get it. I think Buffalo is going to beat the shit out of the Colts. I don't think it matters who plays quarterback for Buffalo in this one. They might win this game 6-0.
The Pats.
I'm sorry. You're right. I'm just so interested to talk about the next game. I think the Pats have no problem here. They might win 6-0, but yeah, I think they'll cover the 5.5. Though.
Our next matchup features the Buffalo Bills traveling to New York to take on the Jets. This was a 13-point line on Wednesday. It has fallen to the Bills being favored by 11.5. The over-under is 46. This also has dropped 1.5. The money line is minus 590 on the Bills, plus 460 for the Jets. A lot of action on the Jets has pushed this line down, Jimmy. Are you with the bookmakers and apparently everybody in betting the Jets here?
Yeah, to me, this feels like the game. This feels like the game where the Bills aren't quite the juggernaut. I'm taking the Jets at plus 11.5, and I'm taking the money line because I think the Jets are going to win this thing outright. So what I started to see a little bit last week, which I imagine Robert Saleh saw the tape as well, and will do the same thing. Josh Allen took some hits last week. They're continuing to run with him. He took some pops last week. I think Robert Saleh is going to trap Josh Allen into scrambling outside, and I think he's going to have linebackers tee off on him. I think this is going to be a physical game, and I've yet to see Buffalo win a close physical game. They probably can, but we haven't seen it. They win shootouts. They lose close games. I think they lose this game.
I think Buffalo rolls in this game.
Wow! No.
I think their defense is going to slow. Zach Wilson just doesn't seem to have it, man. He's just not good, and I don't like his prospects against this Buffalo defense. If we're in the third quarter of this game and Zach Wilson has like one touchdown, 2 picks, and a fumble, is anybody going to be surprised?
No. I would agree with that.
And if that happens, Buffalo's winning this game by 3 scores.
Yeah.
I like Buffalo here. This is another one like the Philadelphia. I'm picking them with the points, but I'm betting them in the 3-team 7-point teaser and the money line. I think they're money this week.
Yeah, I mean, I will say for, Buffalo is very much putting a statement that they want to be crowned the regular season champions. They're playing every week like they've been to 5 Super Bowls. So these are the kind of games that you need to blow out divisional opponents. I don't think they're going to, but I think they need to keep rolling.
Our next matchup is the Minnesota Vikings, who kind of running away with the NFC North. They're traveling to Washington to take on the Armada. The spread is Vikings -3. Over-under sits at 43.5, -165 for the Vikings, +142 for Washington. Jimmy, this is a game that you've talked me into Tyler Heineke, man. That team seems to play hard when he's there. I think this winds up being a field goal game. I'll take Washington here. So at 3, I think it's a push, but I'll take Washington. You've convinced me that Heineke is not terrible.
Yeah, no, he might be terrible, but in this situation for this team, they're playing strong with him. They're playing well with him, so that matters. But I think the Vikings are going to dominate this game. I think the Vikings realize that there's a home playoff game on the line right now that they probably didn't envision a path to at the start of the year. That's now there, and you can't lose. You can't lose. You don't really even want to play close games to teams like Washington. So I think the Vikings win this game by a touchdown.
Our next game is one that I thought looked weird at the start of the week, and now the line has moved a half point from Wednesday. Originally, Arizona at home against Seattle. The Cardinals were favored by 1.5. It is now 2. And that is the sort of thing that puts my radar up. This seems like a stay away now when I thought... I'm just wondering what they know. What do the Sharps know? Because I don't understand why Arizona would be favored here. The over-under sits at 49, +110 for the Seahawks on the money line, -125 for the Cardinals. I just explain this line to me, Jimmy, because this seemed very odd that the 5-3 Seahawks, who are playing really good football and are coached by just Pete Carroll's coaching his ass off, man. He's doing a hell of a job. And they're playing this Cardinals team that just seems to be dumber. I mean, they're more talented, but they just seem to have a dumb coach. I just explain this line.
The Sharps still like Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, I think that's just what it comes down to. And everybody's probably still wondering when the real Geno Smith will stand up. I think
this is the real Geno Smith because they're not really asking him to do anything.
No, you're right. Just find DK and Tyler a couple times a game, and we'll get the job done. No, I mean, I'm taking this is a stay away from me, but for the purpose of the pod, I'm going to take Seattle, but I don't want anything to do with this game.
Yeah, I like Seattle as well with the points. I don't understand. Like, the Seattle teams looks like they're for real. They may have a defined ceiling, but they're not terrible. They're a good football team, and they play to their strengths. Pete Carroll's doing a great job.
Yeah, I agree.
Our next game is another one that I don't want any part of, Jimmy, because Tampa Bay has been an underachieving team. They're playing the Rams, who have also underachieved. This is a 3-point spread. The Buccaneers are favored. 42.5 is the over-under. +130 on the money line for the Rams, -148. I guess what I meant is I don't want anything to do with either of these teams. I think Tampa Bay wins because it doesn't seem like the Rams can block anybody, Jimmy.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a stay away for me as well because I don't think there's any money to be made. Unless you really believe in the Rams, I guess take that 130 money line. I think the under is the only play I like here. I'm going to take the Rams, I guess, for the purpose of our pod. But this feels like a field goal game one way or the other. But I think these two defenses are going to eat. Maybe this game is swung by an interception, return for a touchdown, something like that. But I think it's going to be an ugly football game for two quarterbacks who just don't trust what's happening in front of them.
Yeah, I really like the under here. I think that's the play for this game. Our next matchup is the Kansas City Chiefs are home. They are taking on the Tennessee Titans, who have rebounded from a pretty rocky start. They're 5-2, just like the Chiefs are. The Chiefs are still 12.5-point favorites. The over-under is 46, +450 on the Titans, -625 for the Chiefs. I was really surprised by this line as well. I was surprised the line was so high considering Tennessee has won 3 of the last 4 that these teams have played.
I agree. I think it's crazy that a team that's 5-2 is getting 12.5 points. I'm going to take Tennessee. I don't know if they're going to win. I love that money line, but I'm going to stay away from it because I just really love what Kansas City's been doing. But I'm not sure. I think Tennessee will shorten the game to a point where I don't know if Kansas City will have enough possessions to win by 2 touchdowns. So
that's
I'm
usually what
Tennessee.
happens in these games.
Yeah, it's usually like each team gets the ball like twice a half. Like it's usually a pretty quick game because Tennessee doesn't commit a lot of penalties in the run of football. So I just 12.5 just seems like a ton of points for a team that, remember, they have Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry looks healthy again. So
yeah, I like Tennessee with the 12.5. I do like Kansas City to win this game. I'm putting them in the money line parlay. If you want to put them in a 7-point tease, I don't hate it, but I'm also not making that bet. So I'm keeping the 7-teamers or the 7-pointers with just Philly and Buffalo. I'm not putting Kansas City in a 7-point because even that, knocking it down to 5.5, Tennessee might win.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm strongly considering a hedge on Tennessee at plus 450 because there's real value there.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean it's hard to ever believe another time where 2 5-2 teams played and the line was plus 12.5, or a time where you could get plus 450 odds on a team that's 5-2. Like,
yeah, it's just very weird.
Like this is one where I feel like I can feel okay taking some of the units won this year and putting it into that situation because it's such value on such a good team.
Yeah, especially one like we said, they're 3-4 in their last 4 over the last 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Our next matchup is the Baltimore Ravens traveling to New Orleans to take on the Saints. The Ravens are 2.5-point favorites. The over/under sits at 47.5. Minus 130 money line for the Ravens. Plus 115 for New Orleans. New Orleans just lambasted Vegas last week. And Baltimore looked really good in the second half on the road against Tampa, that Thursday night game. The Ravens have traded for Raquan Smith. He should help their front 7 significantly.
Yep.
Baltimore gets the little mini rest. I really like Baltimore here. They look like they found their running game. I think what we saw last week with New Orleans is more about Vegas not being good.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you said. I think Baltimore is going to go on a little run here starting last week. I love the Ravens in this spot. I think they win this game by a touchdown easy. And New Orleans is just going to have to realize last week was just because you played Vegas, not because you're that good.
Well, that is our Week 9 slate. Already Week 9, the end of the first half, I guess. Week 8.5 doesn't really exist. Just at this halfway point, Jimmy, who are your Super Bowl contending teams right now? Like, what teams do you really think have the best shot in the AFC and the NFC? Like, maybe 2 or 3 teams.
So, like I said earlier, I still think Tampa and the Rams have the potential to get better. But as of right now, to me in the NFC, it's Minnesota and Philly, and in the AFC, it's the Chiefs and the Bills. Like, it would be sad if we don't get an AFC championship game or at least another playoff game of the Chiefs and the Bills.
I think that's what everybody just wants to see, those two teams play each other. And who's that third best team in the AFC has been a question all year. Before the season, a lot of people thought it was the Chargers. It looks like it's either Baltimore or Miami right now, and the next couple of weeks will really determine which one of them it is, or maybe it turns into a 4-way race, and we'll get some really good matchups in the second round where those 4 teams can battle it out. In the NFC, I cannot trust Kirk Cousins in playoff games, and that's why I think Philly is the favorite. And I still give San Francisco a really good shot because there just aren't very many good teams in the NFC. And I don't trust Dallas. I really like their defense, but it's Mike McCarthy in the playoffs, man.
Yep.
Even if Green Bay turns their season around, they just don't look right. They haven't looked right in the playoffs with Devontae Adams. I can't imagine they'll look better without him. And whatever's going on with Tampa, I guess I'm still sort of leaving the jury out on Tampa. I think they can get better, and their best is probably good enough to be the best in the NFC. But it's been so long since I've seen them at their best or anything close to their best that I just don't have any faith in them long term. We'll see. Maybe Tom Brady getting all the news out about the divorce and not having to hide all that stuff or pretend it's not happening, just getting that all behind him will probably help. But it's not going to help that offensive line that doesn't seem able to protect him. And that's what really worries me about Tampa Bay.
Yeah, no, like I said, I completely agree. I think it's fair. I think their path to success has to be Leonard Fournette getting some pressure off of Tom Brady, but their line doesn't seem to be able to run block either. So, just both teams. I mean, just the Buccaneers and the Rams, both they've got to try to scheme or figure something out to where it might not matter. It might not matter how bad Kirk Cousins is in primetime. These teams just might not be good enough. Like, it's just the NFC is weird. I mean, the AFC is weird too because, like, with Miami, you're like, normally they're only good for a quarter and a half, but those 3 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns are enough. Like, it's, I don't know.
They're really following in the footsteps of what that Kansas City team did the year they won the Super Bowl, where they were a lot like those Golden State teams where for 3.5 quarters you're even, but for half a quarter they get hot and they outscore you by 25. So thanks for the win. We normally think in the NFL that offenses like that aren't going to be able to explode in the playoffs, but we've seen in recent years that they have been able to keep points on the board. Defenses have been slower to respond, but that tide seems to be turning. But I think that's what's going to make all of this really interesting. It's going to make it a lot of fun to watch. We can talk a little OBJ right now. How's that? Is that okay?
Okay.
Just real quick, where do you think he winds up? And do you think it'll make a difference?
The logical answer is Green Bay, right? Like, isn't that? I mean, that's because I don't think it's not like OBJ was catching screens and quick slants in LA. So going back to the Rams doesn't help because Stafford's got to get the ball out in 1.5 seconds. Like, so OBJ doesn't make a difference there. He doesn't make a difference in Tampa Bay. I mean, I think Green Bay, or I don't know. I mean, Baltimore's fine. I think Green Bay would be the answer. If it was to be like that expected impact like you have with the Rams, I think it would have to be the Packers.
So I think the Packers make a lot of sense for him, and that seems to be the obvious choice. But the Packers haven't seemed to make those types of moves, and I have real questions on how good OBJ is. I know he looked really good for the Rams last year, but that was with Cooper Kupp on the field and an offense that had a lot of weapons. When he was with the Browns, we saw him have trouble getting separation and really forcing defenses to guard him with 2 guys as a number 1. Yep. And I just don't think he's going to be able to carry that Green Bay offense like they think. So when I'm looking around for places if I was looking around for a team that he might wind up with where he could have the most impact, I'm looking for a team that has a really good wide receiver at the 1 and maybe could use some help across the offense. What if he winds up in Philly?
I don't think so because I don't think OBJ now is better than Devonta Smith personally.
Okay.
Like, I don't think Philly would spend any money on it. Just personally, because I don't think
I think if there was a market for him, he'd already be signed.
I agree with that. And I think it may be another one of those cases is like kind of like what happens over the next 3 weeks. Like, let's say Tennessee beats the Chiefs. Maybe the Titans go out and try to get OBJ. No, I agree with what I agree with everything.
I'm not laughing at the suggestion of that. What I'm laughing about is I had never really considered that, so I didn't think about how OBJ would react week to week to play in with Ryan Tannehill as his quarterback, and just the thought of that made me laugh because we're going to get some great media sound bites if that happens.
I completely agree with everything you said about him he's not. He is no longer built to be a one, but he is a great number two. But Tennessee is so damn good at scheming play action off of Derrick Henry. It may be okay. One place the place I would actually love to see him go. I mean, I think Christian Kirk is doing okay, but especially because they just acquired Calvin Ridley in the trade with the Falcons. I would love to see OBJ go to Jacksonville. I would love to see him in Jacksonville healthy next year, him and Calvin Ridley on the same team. I think that would be really nice.
It would all depend on whether or not Trevor Lawrence is actually good then.
Well, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. He looked like he was starting to put it together, but I don't know. I don't know. It's kind of sad. Seems to be the last couple draft classes of quarterbacks just haven't really. There hasn't really been one that's popped, and maybe that ends up being Trey Lance. But from what we saw in the preseason and before his injury, it didn't look like it.
No, it really didn't.
Well, that's week 9. The Browns will be back next week. They'll be playing the Dolphins in. The Browns are pretty much playing for their season from here out because they already have 6 losses, and they're not going to be able. This is another AFC team that they can't afford to lose this game because this is somebody that when you talk about tiebreakers, they're going to need these wins. And if they drop to the Dolphins, they're 2-5 in the conference. That's really tough to come back from.
Yeah, you cannot lose to any more AFC teams. But, yeah, even with the Browns off this week, there's a lot of exciting matchups. Because, one thing, we didn't really talk about when we were talking about the game. If the Rams or Tampa, if one of them was to, win that game 28-0, would that instantly change your opinion of the NFC?
Wow, I don't know. I feel like that's going to be a fairly. I feel like Tampa's going to win that game pretty comfortably because I don't think LA is going to be able to block enough. I think Tampa's defense is better, but I don't see that being a high scoring game. So I guess I would be surprised if one of them put it together. I guess if one of the lines was able to keep their quarterback clean.
Yeah, against a good defense, then you'd have to almost immediately be like, okay.
Yeah, because both of those defenses are good.
Yeah, I'd be like, okay, well, now this is the second best team in the NFC. Because I feel like the NFC is in a spot where it would be instantaneous. Where if either one of those teams looked like they got the offensive line right, you would immediately be like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, but I don't see that happening though. I don't see those teams looking like their offensive lines are all of a sudden better. All right. Well, we can wrap there. Jimmy, thank you for joining me to talk some football. We'll be back next week to talk more Browns as they get ready for the second half of their season.
No place I'd rather be, brother.
All right. And I want to thank all of you for listening. For Jimmy Champ, I am Evan Belfiore, and we are No Broken Legs.